He was the most feared military commander in the ancient Near East. 900 iron chariots at his command. 20 years of terror. 20 years of silence. Because silence was safer than being noticed. Villages abandoned. Highways empty. An entire nation holding its breath. His name was Sisera. And no army could stop him. But he didn't die on a battlefield. He didn't die by the sword of a rival general. He died in a tent. Quietly. At the hands of a woman no one saw coming. This is the story of Jael. And by the time this is over, you will never forget her name. Who was this woman, really? Why did she do it? And why did an entire nation's freedom come down to one decision, made alone in the middle of the night? Stay with me, because nothing about this story goes the way you expect. To understand Jael, you have to understand the world she lived in, ancient Canaan, roughly 1,200 years before the Common Era. The region was a patchwork of tribes, alliances, and shifting power. Life was fragile. Safety was never guaranteed. And for the people of Israel, things had gone from difficult to catastrophic. The book of Judges records a painful cycle, one that repeats itself again and again throughout the text. The people turn away. Oppression follows. Suffering becomes unbearable. A cry goes out, and a deliverer rises. But between the falling and the rising, there is always a season of darkness. And this season had lasted 20 years. 20 years under King Jabin of Canaan. 20 years under the iron fist of his most powerful weapon, his general, Sisera. Now, when we hear the word chariot today, we might picture something ceremonial, something decorative, a parade float from the ancient world. That is not what 900 iron chariots meant in 1200 BCE. Iron chariots were the tanks of the ancient world, fast, armored, devastating on open ground. They could cut through infantry formations like a blade through cloth. They gave Sisera a military advantage that seemed impossible to overcome. Israel had none. No iron, no chariots, no counter. So for 2 decades, the people did what people do when power crushes them. They survived. They kept their heads down. They stayed off the roads. Judges chapter 5 tells us that travelers avoided the main highways entirely. Commerce stopped. Villages emptied. The land itself seemed to hold its breath. And then something shifted. The people cried out, and God heard them. And he raised up the most unlikely of leaders. Not a warrior, not a king, a woman named Deborah. Deborah is one of the most remarkable figures in all of ancient literature. She held the title of judge, which in this era didn't mean a courtroom. It meant she was a ruler, a decision-maker, a person people traveled to when they needed wisdom, justice, and direction. She also held the title of prophetess, meaning she spoke on behalf of God. Her words carried divine weight. She sat under a palm tree in the hill country of Ephraim, and people came to her from all across the land. Think about what that means for a moment. In a culture that largely confined women to domestic roles, Deborah was leading a nation. She was a person everyone turned to, not despite who she was, but because of it. And one day, she sent for a man named Barak. Barak was a military commander, a capable man, the kind of person you'd want leading your army. Deborah gave him a direct command. The Lord God of Israel commands you, go and march to Mount Tabor. Take 10,000 men, and I will draw Sisera out to meet you at the Kishon River. I will give him into your hands. It was a clear instruction, a divine strategy, the path to 20 years of liberation laid out plainly. And Barak hesitated. He looked at Deborah and said, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." Now, people have interpreted this moment differently over the centuries. Some see weakness. Some see wisdom. Perhaps Barak understood that Deborah's presence represented God's presence. Some see a man simply unwilling to move without confirmation. Whatever his reasoning, Deborah agreed. She would go, but she gave him a warning, a prophecy. She said, "I will go with you, but the road you are taking will not lead to your glory, because the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Barak accepted the terms. He gathered his 10,000 men. He prepared for war, and as he marched, He almost certainly assumed he understood the prophecy. The woman, obviously, was Deborah. He was wrong. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know what city or country has the most people watching this story tonight. Let's see where you all are. The armies assembled near the Kishon River in the valley of Jezreel. On one side, Barak and 10,000 Israelite foot soldiers. On the other, Sisera, his professional army, and 900 iron chariots. On paper, this was no contest. The chariots alone should have ended it before it began. But then the heavens opened. The book of Judges, chapter 5, is Deborah's victory song. It's one of the oldest pieces of Hebrew poetry in existence, and it describes something remarkable happening at that battlefield. The stars fought from heaven. The river Kishon swept them away. Scholars have long interpreted this as a massive rainstorm, a sudden violent downpour that transformed the valley floor. And here is where military strategy collided with nature. Iron chariots are devastating on dry, hard ground. On mud, they sink. They become anchors. The wheels would have bogged down. Horses would have panicked. Drivers would have lost control. Sisera's greatest weapon, the thing that had kept Israel terrified for 20 years, became a liability in a matter of minutes. His technological advantage didn't just disappear. It reversed. Barak charged. The Canaanite army, confused and scrambling, collapsed. The soldiers who could run, ran. Those who couldn't were overtaken. And Sisera, the great general, the terror of 20 years, abandoned his chariot. He ran on foot, alone, panicked, desperate, and he ran toward the only place he thought he might be safe. The Kenite were a nomadic clan who maintained a peace agreement with King Jabin of Canaan. Sisera knew this. He wasn't running toward an enemy. He was running toward neutral ground. People who had no reason to harm him. People whose tents represented safety. He spotted a tent. A woman stood outside. Her name was Jael. She was the wife of Heber the Kenite, and she did something unexpected. She walked toward him. She said, "Turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. Come in. You're safe here." Sisera looked at this woman, this calm, welcoming presence, and made a decision that would seal his fate. He went inside. He was exhausted beyond description. The kind of exhaustion that follows battle and flight. The total collapse of a body that has been running on pure adrenaline. His lungs were burning. His legs were giving out. His mind was racing. He asked for water. Jael gave him milk. Warm, rich, a drink that slows the heart rate. A drink that brings comfort and sleep. She covered him with a blanket. And then Sisera gave her one final instruction. Stand at the entrance of the tent. If anyone comes and asks you if there's a man here, say no. He was using her, trusting her, relying on her silence. And then the most feared military commander in the region closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The adrenaline faded. And Sisera slept. Jael stood there, watching him. The tent was quiet. The sound of the battlefield were far away now. Outside, somewhere in the distance, an army was in collapse. A nation was breathing its first free breath in 20 years. And in here, there was just the sound of a man sleeping. A man who had oppressed innocent people for 2 decades. A man who had made widows and orphans. A man who had emptied villages and filled graves. And Jael made a decision. She moved quietly across the tent. She was a tent dweller, a woman of the nomadic life. She had driven tent pegs into hard, rocky ground hundreds of times. The hammer and the peg were not weapons to her. They were tools, everyday instruments of shelter. She picked them up. She approached Sisera slowly. She knelt beside him. He did not wake. She positioned the peg. She raised the hammer. And she struck. The book of Judges does not soften this moment. It does not look away. She drove the tent peg through his temple, and it went into the ground beneath him. 1 strike, possibly 2. The general who commanded 900 iron chariots, pinned to the earth by a tent peg, not on a battlefield, not by a soldier, in a tent, by a woman, with a hammer. When Barak arrived, still searching for the general who had fled, Jael stepped out to meet him. She said, "Come, I will show you the man you are looking for." He stepped inside, and there lay Sisera, dead. Now here's where this story becomes something bigger than a military account, because in that moment, Deborah's prophecy was fulfilled completely. She had said, "The Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Not Deborah's hand, not the hand of the army, not the hand of Barak, the hand of a woman. And the woman God chose was not an Israelite. Jael was a Kenite. She belonged to a clan that had a peace treaty with the very king who had oppressed Israel. By every human calculation, she was the least likely person to end this war. She had no army behind her, no prophecy spoken over her name, no title, no position. No one told her what to do. She acted alone, in private, in a moment no one else saw. And she changed everything. This is the part of the story that should make you stop and think. We spend so much of our lives waiting to be chosen in public, waiting for the dramatic moment, the stage, the announcement, the recognition. But Jael's moment came in the silence of a tent, with a tool she already had in her hands, with no audience, no fanfare, just a decision, and the courage to act on it. After the battle, Deborah and Barak sang a victory song. It is recorded in Judges chapter 5, and it is ancient. Scholars believe it may be one of the earliest written texts in the Hebrew Bible, a song composed in the immediate aftermath of victory, while the events were still fresh. And in that song, Jael is honored. The lyrics call her most blessed of women. They describe in vivid, almost cinematic detail what she did. They do not minimize it. They do not excuse it. They celebrate it, because they understood what it meant. An oppression that had crushed the people for 20 years ended that night, not through superior military force, not through political negotiation, not through the strength of the powerful, through one woman, in one moment, with what she already had. Sisera made a fatal mistake that night. He looked at Jael and saw only what was convenient, a neutral woman, a safe tent, a place to hide. He did not see who she actually was. He used her hospitality as a shield. He gave her an order. He expected her compliance. And it cost him everything. There is something haunting about the way he died. Not in glorious battle. Not with a sword in his hand. Asleep, hidden, alone, wrapped in a blanket, while the world moved on without him. 20 years of power ended in silence. And Jael, the woman history almost forgot, the woman whose name appears in just a handful of verses, stands as one of the most decisive figures in the entire story of ancient Israel. She was overlooked. She was underestimated. She was exactly who God chose. And this is the question I want to leave with you tonight. Have you ever been in a moment where a decision in front of you felt too big, too quiet, too unseen to matter? Where you thought, surely someone more important than me is supposed to handle this? Because Jael's story says otherwise. Sometimes the most world-changing moments don't happen on a stage. They happen in a tent, with a hammer, and the courage to act when no one else will. If this story moved you, if it made you see something differently, drop a comment below and tell me what hit you the hardest. I am reading every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who feels overlooked, underestimated, or like their moment hasn't come yet, share this video with them right now. Because maybe this is exactly what they needed to see today. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because what's coming next is just as powerful as this one. The women of the Bible were not footnotes. They were the story. And we're just getting started.